Hello, welcome to the Finance Function, the Innov8 Technology podcast where finance technology meets real world business. I'm Mike Armstrong, part of the Innov8 team. We work with businesses across the UK and Ireland, helping them get more from their business systems, whether that's improving what they already have, embracing new technology, or planning for future growth. So today we are tackling a question that many growing businesses eventually face. We're talking about Sage 50. Should you stretch it? Should you look to enhance it? Or maybe even replace it? Because Sage 50 is known by thousands of businesses for many decades. And I'm delighted to be joined by someone who's spent many years helping businesses get the very best from Sage 50 and beyond. It's Innov8 Senior Manager, Greg Hall. Greg, welcome to the Finance Function.
Hi, Mike.
So, Greg, always start off on the podcast kind of giving somebody a little bit of background as to who you are. Kind of already said you are, I guess, an expert with Sage 50. So can you just give us a little bit of an insight of your background and obviously working with Sage 50 as a product?
Yep. So certainly, given my background, I'm going to highlight the senior part of my title. I started working with Sage 50 in 1995 when it was Sage Sterling. Trained as a Sage trainer in 1996 when I was working in chartered practice. And I was the only person who could understand a spreadsheet in the whole of practice. And the partners thought it was amazing because instead of doing things on A4 analysis paper and pencils and rubbers to do a cash flow, it all went into Excel. And that was it. I was a computer manager from then onwards. And I really haven't looked back. Started ACIT Solutions, which was recently acquired by Innov8. And I think I've been involved directly in implementing Sage 50 into well over 1,000 businesses in the last 20, 25 plus years.
And Sage 50 is really been that mainstay in business systems, accounting systems for, as you say, for probably beyond 25, probably 30 to 40 years. It's in many different iterations. So obviously you spent many years implementing Sage 50. Little bit of maybe an anecdote to start off with. What is the craziest Sage 50 implementation that you can think of off the top of your head?
Obviously, there's been many. Craziest is where I've been into businesses and they don't use it at all because they've got it, and then they'll be doing. And one of the classic things is something like petty cash, and somebody be writing it all down in books. And at the end of the month, passing that book to somebody else, and then them actually typing it into the system. And I come up with these crazy ideas of why don't you just type it into the system real time? Because you're just duplicating this thing, and it's just favorite phrase on that is, "Oh, that's just what we've always done." But other than that, the businesses we've worked on, I think one of the most interesting one was a grow shop, where if you know what one of them is, which was basically how to grow cannabis and stock control. Genuine business, but was that a high, we could say?
Very good. Very good. I know this is going to be a good record. So we've already said Sage 50 is a really well-established product within kind of the industry. Why has it stood the test of time?
I think fundamentally it's got the balance right. The balance between an accountant and making sense to accountants. When I look at what we do for businesses on Sage 50, the staff that I've employed and we currently employ, they're not accountants. They're just people who understand process. And I think that's where Sage 50 really is quite strong, is it understands business processes and the accounts fall out the back of it, if that makes sense. Because the majority of users, they may do VAT returns, but they're not accountants. And, but what they record is sufficient for accountants to pick up the backup file, work on the data, and get some sensible accounts out of it. And I think that's where they've got the balance right, where you've got other solutions in the market which are either too commercial and the accounts make no sense and aren't robust enough, or you get things which is too accounting focused, which are clunky in operation and hard to use.
Okay, so kind of a couple of things that it does really well there. And obviously it's grown from basic ledgers and cash to to being a little bit more business system. What other things does it do exceptionally well then?
I think the order processing, stock control, in most simplistic form, it works. It's easy to put a sales order onto the system. It's easy to raise purchase orders in the system. The documentation, the layouts that come out of it look professional, and they portray a company in a good way in their communications with the customers and with the suppliers. Things like bank reconciliations are very simple. Obviously, over the years, we've got things like bank feeds coming into the system now as well, which allows people to just, instead of having to give somebody access to your bank, you can have a credit controller who can basically download the transactions into the system, can pick up all the receipts from customers, allocate them out. And one of my biggest rules, my clients will tell you, is you can't do credit control unless you reconciled your bank up to previous nights. If you've not reconciled your bank, credit control isn't an option. Simple as that. One of the things I say is, if you ever phone somebody up and say, "Oh, you haven't paid my invoice," and they turn around to you and go, in the old-fashioned ways, it'd be, "Oh, the check was in the post." That doesn't work anymore. People say, "Oh, no, I'm sure we paid that last week." You're suddenly losing the argument, spend half an hour trying to find the payment, then go back and go, "Oh, I don't think you did." And it wastes people time. Bank reconciliation's key, up to last night.
So there's obviously quite a lot of features and functionality now existing within Sage 50, and it's now more cloud connected and linking in things like Exchange Online for emails out to customers. And there's obviously a way, and we're going to hopefully get into this a little bit more in terms of actually developing on the system and stretching the use and integrating different applications. But why then, over such a period of time, has Sage 50 just grown and grown as a large user community? What are the things that people have really kind of liked about the software and stuck with it for so long?
I think it goes back to that ease of use. I think brand's got a lot to do with it. The Sage brand, they were the first in the UK to provide accounting software, and that brand is strong. It's a trusted brand, and you need to trust, who you're doing your business with, because fundamentally, if you take Sage 50 out of businesses, there is no business. This is business critical software. And obviously, as business partners, when we're working with our customers, training our customers, sometimes I'd say it's not even training. It's just making them aware of the functionality in the software, just reviewing how they use the software, and just letting them know what it can do, new functionality and the like on that.
Okay, so we're starting to get into a little bit of that stretch mentality possibly now. So a really big, open, wide question. Are businesses really using Sage 50 properly?
I'd like to think our clients do. Our job is to get, I've always said, to get our clients self-sufficient. Self-sufficiency is how, it works for both parties. They're not having to rely on us to reach over their shoulder every time and say, "Oh, how do I do this? How do I do that?" But it's also for us to provide them with systems which basically work. So when we're looking at stretching the product, businesses are all different, but fundamentally they're the same. They normally buy things and sell things. They may be buying people and then selling services, or they may be buying a product and then selling a product. Some people, which we work with very closely, is manufacturers. Manufacturers buy lots of little products, put them together and sell them as something else. And that's where, with one of our biggest products we integrate with Sage 50 is Sim 50. So that basically gives Sage 200 levels of stock control, traceability, multi-locational stock, bills and materials, and works order processing, MRP systems. But where customers only have maybe 2 or 3 people in the office, but they've got 15 people on the shop floor, it controls the production side of it, the stock control side of it, but they don't need any more from an accounting point of view. So Sage 50 with with Sim 50 works perfectly for them. There's other customers who just have multiple orders, and their orders aren't easy to get in the system. Integrating into websites is quite simple, and even just bringing in orders from different areas work really well.
That's a quite interesting line of demarcation, really, isn't it, as well? Because if you've still got quite straightforward accounting requirements, then actually the accounting functionality of Sage 50 is going to really work. But actually, if you're operational needs are a little bit more demanding, then you can start to look at extending it, as you mentioned, Sim 50, or it could be linking in websites, integrations, and automation is key. And if you can automate pulling those orders into your system, it's just one less thing for somebody to be doing, and they can be doing something else. And I really liked how you kind of described that all businesses are the same. They're buying something, they're selling something, and actually then all of a sudden that process becomes a little bit more complicated. Well, the accounting bit takes care of itself within Sage 50 still, but actually then the process piece that can be dealt with. So you mentioned Sim 50. There are plethora of other additions to the solution within the Sage 50 ecosystem and the wider Sage ecosystem. So what does a modern Sage 50 tech stack start to then look like?
One of our favorite third-party add-ins is a company called Adept. Got some great little tools: sales order import tools, purchase order import tools, price list update import tools, and keep going with these things. We use the sales order import tools and purchase order import tools for various different reasons. For example, one of our customers, they're a construction company, and they have effectively a list of all the products they need to buy for the project. That comes out into an Excel spreadsheet, and what we've done is we've basically then had that where they can type the numbers in they want, click on a button, and it then creates the purchase orders with the suppliers in Sage 50. They just need to email them over, and then that pulls the data from Sage 50. They refresh that, and it can see what they've ordered, what they're still outstanding to order, and they can keep reviewing it as they're going through a project, as they're buying more products on it. So from them having their quantity surveying tool, which exports all this data out, the purchasing people just literally need to type in numbers, what they want, hit a button, and the purchase orders are created in Sage 50. We've got other people who've got websites, and their website's been custom built. Just drop those CSV files in every 60 seconds onto looking at an FTP folder, for example. The sales orders that exist in Sage 50. There's so much we can, that level of automation is absolutely fantastic. And again, even it's not about getting data into the system. We're very good at getting data out of the system. So with data connections, we can, one of our customers would think of, again, in construction, they use project costing, and they used to have massive problems with all of their project managers never knowing where they were with the jobs because they could never get in the office to sit there and start running reports. So what we then did was we connected Microsoft Power BI to their Sage 50 data. So now these guys literally, they can see on their mobile phones all their projects. They can see where they are on budget. They can see what the committed costs on there. They can see the actual costs, and then literally that information's displayed, and then they can decide what to bill, what to go for an application. They can do that in the spreadsheet, tick boxes, and then that goes back in. So I'm mentioning spreadsheets a lot. I don't like people putting data into spreadsheets. I like looking at data in the spreadsheets. And that's a big differentiator for me, because spreadsheets are absolutely, Excel is absolutely amazing for getting data, formatting data, and displaying data. So can we build a system with Sage 50, which is easy to use, but you're not replicating the data? One version of the truth is a little phrase I use. Can we have one version of the truth if we extend the capacity to it by using outside sources? Absolutely brilliant.
So a lot of this is kind of extending the life of Sage 50. And again, I think what comes across to me is a phrase of like, where there's a will, there's a way. So whilst it's very much geared for small businesses that maybe want to have maybe slightly more complicated requirements, actually there are ways, means, tools, additions that customers can still get that level of functionality they might with a larger system like Sage 200 or Sage Intacct. But maybe there are a few more working parts to that solution, and maybe require a little bit more manual intervention at certain points. Is that fair to say?
Oh, 100%. And I always say it's tick boxes. Yeah, businesses, if you're going to go in, I suppose with any decision you're making in life, buying a house, you have the list of tick boxes that you want. You want a big garden or south-facing garden. You want double garage. You want an ensuite. All these things, and you have the tick boxes. And some of them are, well, actually, I'll give that up if I can have this. Some of them are, they have to have it. And it's no different when you're buying business software. There's lots of like to haves on there. And customers get to a stage when we're building systems for them, and you say, well, actually, all the things you're doing here, for example, Sage 200 does that better. Sage 200 does this better. And you can say, well, everything you're doing, we can replicate in Sage 200, and we can do that. And effectively, Sage 50 has a glass ceiling. What we're doing is we're going up to the ceiling, and we're looking above and saying, can't really get there. As soon as you just literally jump to the next floor and you're in Sage 200 land, then the whole world opens up completely, because we can replicate everything you're doing. Things which have been slightly outside system can come inside system in a completely integrated solution. And then the add-ons and the scope for vertical markets and everything else goes to a different level. And we like to work with our customers. I'm an accountant by trade. I'm not a salesman. So I can talk to customers about functionality. I can talk about their business processes, and what return on investment they'll get by investing in the right solutions. And there's a time, and I think you've mentioned it before, is when you are going off-piste a little bit and you're spending too much time in workarounds and getting a little bit too complicated, because it's a bit bespoke the way people do it. It works. But then that's the time when we'd say, do you know what? Let's get it standardized. Let's get it back into the system and get Sage 200 to do it. And that's where we can go. And obviously, as I said, I mentioned Sage 200 because we're very heavily in manufacturing, and Sage 200 is an excellent solution for manufacturing. But that also works for Intacct, because a lot of businesses who are using Sage 50, they're the next level to bring in the level of controls that they want. And again, I mentioned controls. Working from home, everybody used to sit in the office, used to say, oh, I'm just going to buy some of these. Is that all right? And it would be in the office. Those people now, if they're remote, there needs to be a process where people are authorizing these type of transactions, because it's, they're not sitting next to each other anymore. And that's where, systems like Intacct and Sage 200 give people those controls.
I had a good conversation with Chris last week about kind of the one system mentality, or best of breed. There's obviously different approaches to trying to achieve ultimately what is the same goal for lots of businesses. I like the term you used, off-piste. When those limits are being hit regularly, or there is really a genuine hard stop or a dead end within the system, that's where the pain then starts to override the financial commitment, and people have got a bit of a decision to make. So recognizing those limits, what are the typical warning signs?
Just one jumps to mind. I've got a client who's a manufacturing customer of ours, and they're basically hitting the 20 users in Sage 50 limit. Sage 50, current license form, you can buy in single user, 5 users, 10 users, or 20 users. They've got more than 20 people who need to log into Sage 50, and that's now becoming an issue, because some people can't do their jobs. They literally, can't. They're frozen out of the system. People are quite expensive these days. The minimum wage has gone up, which has pushed everyone else's wages up. So when you're actually considering looking at a financial system, often a very complex ERP solution, we can put in for the cost of one member of staff. If that's going to benefit 20 members of staff and make them more productive, the return on that investment is very, very quickly recovered. But that's one thing, user count. So the main one, which Sage 50, and I'm not going to gloss this over, the database structure is nearly as old as me, and which is quite old. Okay. So where modern solutions are running on slick, SQL databases with pretty much infinite capacity to, record tens of thousands of transactions a day in some instances, Sage 50 is not there. Sage 50 is on this flat file database structure. It's being protected by a data service, which is in some environments a little bit flaky. And it means that, data service can stop and then people can't post. So there's downtime. And obviously if that downtime is multiplied by multiple users, and it's not just them not being able to do their jobs, but if then they're not able to get the orders in the system, so then that's going to backlog production or picking or whatever, those areas are. In a perfect world, on lovely new shiny hardware and in test environment, you can batter it and you can test it and you can have loads and loads of transactions going through it. But in reality, when you've got a network and it's been in place and someone's decided to connect into it via Wi-Fi, although we seriously recommend you don't use Sage 50 across Wi-Fi, but somebody is, the system runs at the slowest of anybody's connections. In great hardware with gigabit networking, it can keep up. As soon as you have some hardware which is struggling to serve, another example of somebody had paid £15,000 for a nice shiny new server from their IT company with RAID disk arrays and everything else, running mechanical disks. Their data was running really slowly on my server. £15,000 later, I put the data on my laptop, which got an NVMe drive, shared that across the network, and it was significantly quicker. So that's a big limitation. So it's not even throwing money at the issue. Again, should you need to do that in 2026? Possibly not.
And I think that's where that expertise of the Innov8 team, the wider team, kind of in that advisory role, consultancy piece kind of comes in of how to make things work better. As you've kind of given 3 or 4 examples there, things that people might not necessarily consider, but you come across it once or twice, then somebody else hits that same challenge or a similar thing. You maybe it isn't a server refresh that you need. Actually, maybe it is that investment needs to be in a different solution. I think as you were talking there as well, it's where those challenges start to become again repetitive, blocking, and it's also things in multiples. So multiple people, multiple entities, multiple sites. That's also where headaches start to come more frequent, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Let's go back to my tick list. It's the scales. When does that balance? When does it tip? When do those scales tip? When is everything working fine? And it can be the very lightest task can just tip those scales so that it actually goes to we need more from the system. I spent 25 years getting the most out of Sage 50 and just trying to deal with all the customers' needs. And we've done some amazing things, and we can do amazing things with it. And it's just speaking to the customers, understanding their requirements, understanding their business requirements, not across one area of the business, but across the whole business. That joined up system, one version of the truth, where one person does their job, and then that actually makes the next person in that process their job easier. And going back to spreadsheets, I've got clients where I've gone in to see them, and you've got a sales spreadsheet, purchasing spreadsheet, you've got a production spreadsheet, and then the dispatch guy has literally got no idea what's coming because none of it's all joined up. But they're all happy because what I do is I just do this and that's all I do. But they're not helping that next person down the line. And it's trying to make sure that everything anybody does is working collaboratively with their colleagues. So you get that one version of the truth.
It's a really clear message, isn't it? That actually Sage 50 can be a great solution and work really well for you. And you can extend it and stretch it and make it continue to be fit for purpose and continue to extend its lifespan a little bit. But then there probably does become a point for a number of businesses where moving beyond Sage 50 is pretty obvious. But it's also an interesting point because it's not necessarily these days a single destination where you've got a business partner like Innov8. There's obviously a consultation piece to happen at that point. So the businesses still just assume there's only one next step because obviously there are things they can be evaluating across the marketplace. But even within Sage these days, within the Sage product suite, is Sage 200 the next best thing? Is it Sage Intacct? The businesses still see the bubble that they exist within the Sage 50 ecosystem, or is that wider knowledge kind of growing?
We certainly talk to our customers. We always talk to our customers about what they're doing. I always mention you could do that in Sage 200, but in the same breath, I'm not saying you need to go to Sage 200. I'm saying you could do that in Sage 200. We can't do that in Sage 50, but in isolation, that's not a reason for you to go. You may need to do that outside system because, and I'll to bring up a classic example when I'm going through scoping with a customer and they come up with something that they need to do and they said, but it has to do this. And I love asking a question, well, how often do you do that? And I go, I reckon we did that 3 or 4 times last year. And you go, do you know what? That is not critical to get my solution to work, but because you've done something before doesn't mean that the system has to do it, but if there's something which you do regularly, or do you know what, it happens at least 3 or 4 times a week, and it's a real, blocker to actually getting stuff out the door. Okay, well, no, we need to address that. We need to make sure that you've got a solution around that. And things like that is, I mentioned delivery notes. In manufacturing, to deliver something out the door, and I always talk about food because I like food. So if you're baking a cake and you're running out of cherries, but you can bake the cake, you can ice the cake, and the last thing that's going to happen is the cherries are going to get delivered. Someone's going to grab those cherries as they come through the door, stick them on top of the cake, and then they're literally going to put it in a box and it's going to go out the door. From a processing point of view, somebody's got to put on a goods received note for the purchase order to say the cherries are in. That's got to allocate it to the works order. We need to issue the cherries to the works order. We need to complete the works order. Then we need to allocate it to the sales order and dispatch the sales order, which will create a delivery note. What do you want? You want a delivery note as quickly as possible. So that would be where we would just have a layout called delivery note, where they can literally just pick up the sales order, click on print, and it comes out with delivery note written on it. And that goes out the box, and then we can go, okay, let's process that, but the customer's got his cake. That's, the customer has his cake and eats it. There we go. Just keep everyone happy. So, but they're the sort of things which the system doesn't. The system wants you to go along the lines of the system. You must do this before you do that, before you do that. Whereas we understand the actual demands of business is we need to do that quickly.
And it's that configurability, isn't it, as well? Sage 50 would be significantly more structured in that process than what you might be able to configure natively within that process for somebody in, say, Sage 200, where, well, when that button gets clicked, it actually does that whole process in the background. You don't see it, you don't feel it. It's just that ease of being able to do your job at that point. So what else should be businesses evaluating when they're looking at their options around Sage 50 and thinking, are we looking at extending its life, or are we looking at switching?
I suppose one of the biggest words is control. Okay, so with Sage 50, I think I mentioned it earlier. So some of the benefits of Sage 50 is it's simple, but also that's a weakness because people want to have controls. So one of the classic examples on that is purchase order processing. I don't want anybody to be able to raise purchase orders over £10,000 without me approving it. Sage 50 said, no, none of that. Sage 200 says, yep, I can do that. What I can do is every time someone puts a purchase order on for £10,000, it'll ping you an email on your phone. From there, you can click on a button and approve it. Then that will, at that stage, once you've done that, then they can print that purchase order. So that's a level of difference, which means that people have control. The other thing is around accounting. So with Sage 50, I can run my profit and loss account because it's an open book accounting system. I could run a P&L for May. I could look at my profit and loss account for May, and I could say that we've made £50,000 profit in May. Woohoo. I'm really excited. I'm going straight down to Porsche dealership and I'm going to order myself a new Porsche. What could then happen is an invoice can come in, dated May. My bookkeeper puts it on and goes, yeah, that's a £25,000 invoice we missed off. And then when I get my June accounts, I've made enough 50 grand in June. Well, this is great. But when I actually look at my year-to-date values, or what my year-to-date value was at the end of May, and then I add my £50,000 to it to get to my year-to-date value for June, it's not the same. It's £25,000 less because it gets lost. Again, that is critical if you're reporting to a board of directors. So if you're reporting to a board of directors or to shareholders, and they don't have daily input into the accounts, they want the results that they get to be 100% accurate. Something like Sage 200, because it's a closed period accounting system, you then have the ability to close those periods. You can close off May. What would happen to that £25,000 invoice is it just automatically drop in to the next open period, which would be June. So then when you get the June accounts, got excited about May, June doesn't look too good because it's picked up the slack. These are the areas which are critical to businesses, especially if they've got external investors. You don't want to be telling effectively lies to these people and giving them inaccurate data because then there is no value in that data. So that's I think that's a big thing. because as I started saying that Sage 50 is very good at doing the processing and processing transactions around the commercial side of a business, and you don't necessarily have to be an accountant to use it. That also is a weakness because you don't have to be an accountant to use it. What comes out of it, if you don't understand what you're doing, isn't going to give you the level of accuracy you potentially would want.
And as you're a growing business and scaling, and those things become more prevalent and important to, as you say, different stakeholders, directors, it could be budgetary requirements, all those kind of things start to become in, as complexity starts to be added into business, you need a system that's going to kind of keep up with that pace. So when then businesses are thinking about that future growth, where does that then leave them with Sage 50? What is there ever, and I think I already know the answer to this, is there ever a good point to be thinking about making this change?
Well, the good time to decide to make the change is normally before you need to make the change. Unfortunately, we're human, and what people do is they do try to just carry on, and then they realise, hold on, we need to do that now. And because they're too busy, and if you're too busy, it's very difficult trying to implement a new ERP solution into the business when you haven't got the time to, literally do your day job. We know what we're doing, and we try to work with customers to the realistic timescales of implementing new systems. But yeah, I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is people leave it too late. So it's nice to keep in touch with the customers. Our Sage 50 customers, we try to keep in touch as much as we can, find out what's happening in their business. Is there anything is there any needs they need? And, when that tick sheet starts going and the scales are starting to tip, can we make the decision sooner rather than later?
I think a lot of people could attest to that.
Yeah.
And we've definitely heard. I said, I thought I knew the answer before I asked the question, but always good to feel validated in my own thoughts. But so if someone is listening and they're running Sage 50 today, which I'm sure there's many people that are, what's maybe the one thing they should be investigating right now for changing systems?
The latest release, version 34, has been released last week, and they're putting Sage Copilot quite front and center into the system, so that you've got the ability to start asking questions around the data. Going back to my accounting bit earlier, there's things where it will flag up when somebody's posted the wrong nominal code, or you don't normally post invoices from that supplier to that nominal code. I've been working with the guys at the Sage Network, which is going to be embedded into Sage 50 and Sage 200 imminently. So effectively what that means is all your customer invoices get uploaded to a portal where your customers can log onto that portal, and then they can see their balances, they can see copies of the PDF invoices, and then they can see allocations and stuff. So again, that saves a lot of time. And where Sage are, because Sage are at the forefront of technology, that Sage network is going to develop, and it's going to start talking to each other. So where invoices will be uploaded automatically, we'll get to a stage when they're downloaded automatically as well into the Sage product, and they will automatically post. This is massive in Europe. It's legislatively enforced in, I think, France and Spain. There is literally system-to-system invoicing matching up. Sage are working on that, and that's in Sage 50. And these are bits which, people need to embrace. The new functionality, we've got the AI capture, purchase recognition capture. As a part of your Sage 50 subscription, you get 75 free captures every month. We've just got the new Sage Expenses app, which is embedded in Sage 50, which automatically posts into, Sage 50. But it's looking at the value you get from the bits they're adding in, and Sage are putting their prices up every year of Sage 50 because they're adding more to it. And I always say to my customers, embrace it. Don't just say it's what we've always done, what we've always used. Have a look at what's available. It's a bit like when you get a new car and it's got adaptive cruise control, lane assist, and all these bits and pieces. And so many people get in and go, I don't like it, I can turn it all off. And, but if you get used to it and you actually look into it and think it's a benefit, it will help you.
Yeah. So that, as you said, within that version 34 release, that could, for some people, cure some pain, extend the life a little bit more, and give them a little bit of a longer future with Sage 50. And so I guess that's maybe one thing that people should be thinking about Sage 50 in 2026. and it brings in future proofing as well, doesn't it? So, I guess one thing I did it last time with Chris, and I'm going to do it again with yourself today, Greg, is some fast fire questions. I've got 5 fast fire questions to finish off with. Tried to give Chris 30 seconds to answer. I think sometimes he deviated a little bit beyond that, but anyway. So, first question, fast fire. I think I should maybe have some backing music or something to part of the podcast. But what would you say is the most underrated feature or capability within Sage 50?
I think the reporting. I think the typical business puts a lot of data in, doesn't get enough data out, and it's all in there. And the answers to so many questions exist in the software, and with correct reporting, they can surface that information.
Brilliant. That was fast fire. Good. Okay, we're getting the grip of this. One myth about Sage 50 that simply isn't true.
That it's basically been shelved. Sage, it is Sage's biggest revenue generator in the UK. To the best of my knowledge, it's still got, I think, over 100,000 users. And it is very much front and center in Sage's portfolio.
Fantastic. What's the biggest mistake then businesses make when evaluating new systems away from Sage 50?
I think the biggest thing is they don't realize how easy Sage 50 is to use. And I can even quote this from myself. My wife's got a business, and it's a health foods business, and her point of sale system integrates with. It is so clunky, and it takes 5 clicks to do what Sage 50 does in a single click on updating purchase invoices. It's horrible, genuinely, and that's me trying to embrace it, but just going, I don't like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Question 4 then, what's more important then, better software or better processes?
I think better software generates better processes. I think the two go hand in hand. If your processes aren't particularly good, the data won't be particularly good. So yeah, the two have to go hand in hand. I can't, you can't separate them.
I'll let you sit on the fence on that one then. Okay, and then finally, question 5, in one sentence, or I'll maybe give you 2. When should a business start looking beyond Sage 50?
When the scales tip, or the scales are tipping. When the amount of functionality in the system is not sufficient for their business needs, and they'll get a better return on investment. The investment is in their staff. The biggest investment is in their staff. If we can make those staff more productive, more joined up, then they will get the benefit.
Fantastic. I mean, I think there's been some golden nuggets of insight and information in there, Greg. So firstly, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insight and experience. But that's it for today's episode of The Finance Function. Sometimes the right answer is to try and make better use of what you already have. Sometimes it is about enhancing that existing solution or possibly planning for that next stage of business growth. So if you would like to learn more about Sage 50 and enhancing it, Sage 200 or indeed Sage Intacct, the Innov8 team are absolutely well equipped to answer any of your questions. So please do feel free to get in contact. And if you have enjoyed today's episode of The Finance Function, please make sure to give you a follow wherever you get your podcasts. So until next time, keep moving further and faster.
One of our favourite third-party add-ins is a company called Adept. Good old Martin, lovely guy. I've known him for well over 20 years. A real techie. He had a beard before beards were fashionable. That's how technical he is.